Alienware M15 Ryzen Edition R5, Ryzen 7 5800H plus RTX 3060, Opinion. The Alienware M15 Ryzen Edition R5 is a speedy AMD-powered notebook. Alienware and AMD haven't been used in the same sentence for a long time, but the Red Team's processors have made their way back into the UFO-shaped notebook brand's lineup this year. While being featured in parent company Dell's G515 since 2020, none of the AMD-powered gaming notebooks that came to retail previously had high-end GPUs. The GeForce RTX 3060 in our review unit isn't exactly top of the line, but the RTX 3070, which is available as an upgrade, is a big step up. Those high-powered GPUs lend some legitimacy to AMD's gaming notebook aspirations. So beyond just being in an Alienware notebook, this is a welcome development. We already knew from previous reviews that AMD's Zen 3 notebook processors were awfully fast, and this Alienware notebook is no different. Of the shipping notebooks we've tested, this has some of the best lightly threaded CPU performance we've ever seen. The same is true for its 8-core, 16-thread processor in heavily multi-threaded workloads as well. The Ryzen 7 5800H is not a processor to be taken lightly, so it's the right choice for a fancy gaming notebook. It's a little early to try to compare with Intel's newest Tiger Lake H processors, but those look pretty promising as well. This is the first time we've gotten our hands on a GeForce RTX 3060 in a notebook, and it acquitted itself nicely, at least for 1080p gaming. Just about every game we tested performed well north of the baseline 60 FPS we require to feel superior to console peasants and provide a good gaming experience. While these titles at the settings we chose didn't push the 165Hz of the M15 R5's display panel, it certainly cranked out the frames. We do have concerns that 6GB of GDDR6 RAM on a 192-bit memory bus might eventually feel pretty limiting, since the latest generation of consoles have 16GB of shared memory that can be used for graphics tasks. However, that's probably a couple of years away from rearing its ugly head, at least as long as developers are still making games for the PS4 and Xbox One series. There is a lot to love about the seamy underbelly of this notebook, too. Going all the way back to the M15 R2, at least, soldered RAM has been the order of the day. But this time around, we get 2 honest-to-goodness DDR4 SODIMM slots so that we can upgrade the notebook ourselves. The miniature M.2 2230 format of the SSD is a little less exciting, but it's also upgradable. Getting 16GB of memory and 512GB of storage today, as our review unit has, and upgrading later is a legitimate path to making the notebook last longer. And if a component dies after the warranty expires, it can be easily swapped out. Lest we get too caught up in it, though, other gaming brands already supported that sort of thing. For instance, the Asus ROG Zephyrus G15 we recently reviewed has SODIMMs and a much more common M.2 2280 SSD. As configured, our Ryzen Edition M15 R5 has a Ryzen 7 5800H. 16GB of DDR4 memory, a 512GB SSD, and the GeForce RTX 3060 with 6GB of RAM. Don't forget a 165Hz 1080p display, 4-zone RGB backlit keyboard, and 2.5GB Ethernet as well. Configured that way, our review unit rings up at $1,649 on Alienware's website. As far as Alienware laptops go, that's pretty reasonable. Stepping up to a 125-watt GeForce RTX 3070 is another $250, which is a steal when thinking about how much a desktop GeForce RTX 3070 sells for on eBay these days. We'd think awfully hard about upgrading, even if we stuck with a 1080p display, so we can get more frames into that 165Hz panel. Tougher decisions come when comparing this machine's pricing to other brands. For example, the ROG Zephyrus G15 we mentioned earlier has twice the storage, A 165Hz 1440p display in a GeForce RTX 3070 for $1,499. The CPU is a Ryzen 9 5900H+, which has a higher boost clock but a smaller 35W TDP, so that's kind of a wash even though it's technically a better CPU. There's also no integrated webcam on the Asus machine, which is an odd quirk. It's true that the Asus GeForce option only gets an 80-watt thermal budget, but that didn't stop it from beating the Alienware M15 Ryzen edition in our tests more often than not. In that context, it might make the M15R5 a tougher sell. Even Dell's own G15 Ryzen edition packs better specs for less money, but without the Alienware branding, unique Alienware software, and premium aesthetic. In the end, it boils down to what a buyer values more, the overall package and premium aesthetic versus raw specs and performance. There are some design choices here that contribute to a higher bottom line for the Alienware M15 Ryzen Edition R5, including the higher 125-watt thermal budget and the cooling system required to keep everything healthy and humming along at full speed. There is also plenty of flashy RGB labeling on hand, a high-quality keyboard and premium materials, if these sort of trimmings are important to you. Buyers that hold raw performance per dollar as king might want to consider other options, but gamers that want to stand out in a crowd of boring black notebooks and still have plenty of high-powered gaming performance would do well to consider the Alienware M15 Ryzen Edition R5. Plus, AMD Ryzen 5000 CPU performance. GeForce RTX 3060 is great for 1080p. User upgradable storage and RAM. Lots of external expansion ports. 165Hz, 1080p display. Great battery life in non-gaming tasks. RGB bling and UFO stylings. Minus. Display is not very bright. Pricey compared to similar notebooks. Very warm surface temperatures under load. Missing SD card reader from Intel model.